Part 1. The Illusion of Money. What if everything you've ever believed about money was only half the truth? Not entirely wrong, but dangerously incomplete. From the moment you were old enough to understand the world, a silent program began to install itself into your mind. Work hard, earn a living, save what you can, repeat until retirement. It sounds logical, it sounds safe, and yet, for millions of people, it leads to a life of quiet frustration, where effort never quite matches reward. You've seen it yourself, people who wake up early, work long hours, sacrifice their time, their energy, even their health, and still struggle to break free. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone is operating under a completely different set of rules. They are not necessarily working harder, but money seems to move toward them with less resistance, as if guided by an invisible force. This contrast is not an accident. It is not luck. It is the result of understanding something most people never even realize exists. Money is not just a physical thing. It is not just numbers in a bank account or paper in your wallet. It is a reflection, a mirror of deeper systems at play. Systems of perception, belief, and value. And here lies the hidden truth. Money does not respond primarily to effort. It responds to alignment. If your internal world, your thoughts, your beliefs, your expectations, is out of alignment with wealth, then no amount of external effort will sustain it. You may earn money temporarily, but it will slip away, disappear, or remain just out of reach. This is why so many people feel like they are constantly chasing something they can never fully catch. But imagine for a moment that the rules you were taught are not the only rules. Imagine there is an underlying structure, an invisible framework that determines how money flows, who it flows to, and why. Once you begin to see this framework, everything changes. The struggle begins to make sense. The patterns become clear, and most importantly, you realize that your current financial reality is not fixed. It is a result of how you are interacting with this invisible system. This audiobook is not here to motivate you with empty phrases or temporary inspiration. It is here to expose the deeper mechanics behind wealth, the principles that operate whether you are aware of them or not. Because awareness is the first step to control, and control is the first step to transformation. The moment you begin to understand how money truly works, you stop seeing it as something distant or mysterious. You begin to see it as something predictable, something you can influence, something you can align with. Right now, you may feel like money is something you have to chase, something you have to fight for, but that belief itself may be the very thing holding you back. Because money, at its core, is not designed to be chased endlessly. It is designed to flow, and like any flow, it follows certain paths. Paths shaped by mindset, perception, and value. If you are not on those paths, you will always feel resistance. But once you step onto them, something remarkable happens. The struggle begins to ease. Opportunities begin to appear, and what once felt impossible starts to feel inevitable. This is where your journey begins, not with more effort, not with more struggle, but with the shift in understanding. Because when you change the way you see money, you change the way money sees you. Part 2. The Invisible Law of Wealth. There is a law governing money, but it is not written in textbooks, and it is rarely taught in schools. It operates quietly, consistently, and without exception. Whether you are aware of it or not, it is shaping your financial life at every moment. This law is simple in structure, but profound in impact. Money flows toward value, guided by perception, and controlled by belief. Most people misunderstand at least one of these elements, and that misunderstanding creates friction, a kind of invisible resistance that blocks financial growth. Value is the first pillar. Money is not given for effort alone. It is exchanged for perceived value. This is why two people can work equally hard, yet earn vastly different amounts. The difference is not effort, it is the level of value they provide, and how that value is perceived by others. A person who solves bigger problems, or solves them more effectively, naturally attracts more money. But here is the deeper layer. Value is not just what you create, it is what others recognize. Perception amplifies or diminishes value, and perception itself is influenced by positioning, communication, and confidence. This leads to the second pillar, perception. The way people see you and the way you see yourself directly affects your financial outcomes. If you undervalue yourself, the world often reflects that undervaluation back to you. If you hesitate, doubt, or minimize your worth, opportunities pass by unnoticed or unclaimed. On the other hand, when you carry a strong internal sense of value, your actions change. You negotiate differently. You present yourself differently. You make decisions with greater certainty. And as a result, the external world begins to respond differently. But beneath both value and perception lies the most powerful force of all, belief. Your beliefs about money act as a filter through which every opportunity is interpreted. If you believe money is scarce, you will unconsciously focus on limitations. If you believe wealth is difficult to achieve, you will avoid risks that could lead to growth. These beliefs operate quietly, often without your awareness, yet they shape your decisions in profound ways. They determine what you attempt, what you avoid, and what you ultimately achieve. The invisible law of wealth is not something you can ignore. It is always active. The question is not whether it affects you, the question is whether it is working for you or against you. When your beliefs, your perception, and your value are aligned, money flows with surprising ease. When they are misaligned, even the hardest work can feel like pushing against an invisible wall. Understanding this law changes everything. It shifts your focus from external struggle to internal alignment. Instead of asking, "How can I work harder?" you begin to ask, "How can I increase my value? How can I change my perception? How can I upgrade my beliefs?" These questions lead to entirely different actions and entirely different results. Once you see this law clearly, you can no longer unsee it. You begin to recognize patterns in the world around you. You see why some people rise quickly while others remain stuck. You understand that wealth is not random, it is systematic. And systems, once understood, can be mastered. Part 3. Why most people stay stuck. Most people are not trapped by their circumstances, they are trapped by their conditioning. From an early age, subtle messages begin to shape the way they think about money. They are taught to prioritize safety over growth, stability over opportunity, and certainty over possibility. These lessons are not inherently wrong, but they create a mindset that is optimized for survival, not for expansion. And survival thinking, while useful in certain situations, becomes a limitation when applied to wealth creation. But they create a mindset that is optimized for survival, not for expansion. And survival thinking, while useful in certain situations, becomes a limitation when applied to wealth creation. This conditioning manifests in predictable patterns. People trade time for money, believing it is the only reliable path. They seek comfort in routines, even when those routines produce minimal progress. They avoid risk, even when calculated risk is necessary for growth. Over time, these patterns solidify into habits, and those habits create a cycle that is difficult to break. Earn, spend, stress, repeat. The cycle continues, not because people lack intelligence or effort, but because their thinking is constrained by invisible boundaries. One of the most powerful aspects of this conditioning is that it feels normal. When everyone around you operates under the same assumptions, those assumptions become invisible. They are no longer questioned. They are accepted as reality. This is why breaking free is so challenging. It requires not just new actions, but a willingness to question deeply ingrained beliefs. It requires stepping outside of what feels familiar and embracing a different way of thinking. The wealthy, in contrast, operate under a different mental framework. They do not see money as something that must be earned solely through time and effort. They see it as something that can be generated through systems, leverage, and strategic thinking. They focus on creating assets rather than relying solely on income. They prioritize growth over comfort, and they understand that short-term uncertainty is often the price of long-term success. This difference in thinking leads to a difference in behavior. While most people seek security, the wealthy seek opportunity. While most people avoid risk, the wealthy manage it. While most people focus on earning, the wealthy focus on building. These differences may seem subtle, but over time, they compound into dramatically different outcomes. Breaking free from the cycle requires awareness. you must first recognize the patterns that are keeping you stuck. You must see the limitations in your current thinking and be willing to challenge them. This is not an easy process. It requires honesty, discipline, and a willingness to change. But it is possible. And once you begin, the momentum builds. The moment you shift from survival thinking to growth thinking, everything begins to change. You start to see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You begin to take actions that align with long-term success, rather than short-term comfort. And slowly, the cycle that once trapped you begins to break. Part 4. The turning point of value. There comes a moment in every transformation when the perspective shifts completely. It is not gradual, it is sudden, almost like a switch flipping in the mind. Before this moment, the focus is on earning more. After this moment, the focus shifts to becoming more. This is the turning point, and it changes everything. Most people spend years asking the wrong question: how can I make more money? While this question is understandable, it leads to limited solutions. It keeps the focus on external outcomes rather than internal development. The better question, the one that unlocks real growth, is this: how can I become more valuable? This shift may seem small, but its implications are enormous. Value is the foundation of wealth. It is what determines how much money you can earn, how quickly you can grow, and how sustainable your success will be. When you focus on increasing your value, you naturally develop new skills, expand your knowledge, and improve your ability to solve problems. These improvements create opportunities that would not have existed otherwise. But value is not just about skills, it is also about perspective. It is about understanding what the world needs and positioning yourself to provide it. It is about recognizing patterns, identifying opportunities, and acting decisively. These abilities are not innate, they are developed through intentional effort and continuous learning. As your value increases, your confidence grows. You begin to see yourself differently, and that change in self-perception influences how others see you. You communicate more effectively, you take on greater challenges, and you position yourself for higher-level opportunities. This creates a feedback loop where increased value leads to increased confidence, which leads to even greater value. The turning point is not about abandoning effort, it is about redirecting it. Instead of working harder in the same direction, you begin to work smarter in a more effective direction. You focus on activities that produce exponential results rather than linear outcomes. You prioritize growth over comfort, and you embrace challenges as opportunities to expand your capabilities. This shift is not always easy. It requires letting go of old habits and embracing new ones. It requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to invest in yourself. But the rewards are significant. As your value grows, so does your ability to attract money. Not through force, but through alignment. Part 5. Aligning with the flow of wealth. Once you understand the principles of wealth, the next step is alignment. Knowledge alone is not enough, it must be translated into action. And that action must be consistent, intentional, and aligned with the underlying laws you now understand. This is where transformation becomes reality. Alignment begins with mindset. You must replace limiting beliefs with empowering ones. This does not happen overnight, it requires repetition, reflection, and reinforcement. You must consciously choose thoughts that support growth, opportunity, and abundance. Over time, these thoughts become beliefs, and those beliefs shape your actions. Next comes value creation. You must actively seek ways to increase your value in the marketplace. This could involve learning new skills, improving existing ones, or identifying unmet needs and addressing them. The goal is not just to work more, but to work in a way that produces greater impact. Impact is what drives income, and the greater your impact, the greater your potential for wealth. Action is the bridge between understanding and results. Without action, even the most profound insights remain theoretical. You must be willing to take risks, to step outside your comfort zone, and to pursue opportunities that align with your goals. This requires courage, but it also builds resilience. Each action, whether successful or not, contributes to your growth. Consistency is what sustains progress. It is not enough to act once or twice, you must act repeatedly, even when results are not immediate. This persistence is what separates those who succeed from those who remain stuck. Over time, consistent action compounds, creating momentum that accelerates your progress. Finally, alignment requires patience. Wealth is not built overnight, it is the result of sustained effort and continuous improvement. There will be challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but if you remain aligned with the principles of value, perception, and belief, progress is inevitable. Money, in the end, is not something you chase endlessly. It is something you align with. And when that alignment is achieved, the flow begins not by chance, but by design.